I did get to know Thompson Webb and Vivian Webb very well, and I had actually gotten to know Thompson Webb before coming to Webb School because my dad was an Episcopalian minister, and in those days, Thompson Webb would invite local area ministers. My dad was kind of on the limit of the local area from Santa Barbara, down to give the chapel talks. And my dad had been the chaplain at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, and was a Southerner, grew up in Mississippi, and of course Thompson Webb was a Southerner. And I would come down with my dad, and as a little kid, and pre-Webb age, and wander around the school. And I was fascinated by the school. There was a TV set that one of the students had built in the pergola, out of some kind of kit or something, and it was big, giant cathode ray screen TV tube. And Thompson Webb and Vivian Webb would take us out to dinner, my dad and me, and occasionally other friends. So I was already well acquainted with Thompson Webb. And he would say to my dad in his inimitable Tennessee accent, "Now, George, when your boy is ready to go to school, you make sure he comes to Webb." And in fact, Thompson Webb gave, he owned the school completely. That was pre-Board of Trustees. And my dad would write him a check for, Thompson said, "You send what you can." Thompson Webb said, "Send what you can." And my dad would send a check, and Thompson Webb would never cash it. If I hadn't, well, of course, I think it's too much for a little kid to really like somebody. But if I hadn't been impressed with him and found him to be, somebody that was really powerful, not in the sense of overwhelming, but jovial and funny and conversational. And interesting, I wouldn't have come to Webb. So his arrival here, my arrival at Webb was in large part due to Thompson. Of course, Thompson Webb was an astonishing speaker. He gave chapel talks which were spellbinding. He could talk for 2 hours, and kids would listen. It's hard to keep the attention of high school kids for 2 hours or even for an hour. But he was a spellbinding orator, and funny, and had all kinds of jokes and stories and all that. He was not a morose, solemn person by any means. He was funny and interesting and good company. He was a person who believed in being decent and being, I think, a good friend and a good companion to your friends and associates. And he believed in being honorable. They were a constant presence, walking around on campus, saying hello to people. And Thompson Webb, if he were at a meal, would always say the grace before the meal. So that was a fairly regular daily interaction. And Vivian Webb would come to meals and say hi to people. She knew every student's name. I don't know how soon she learned it, but boy, I never saw her not know a student's name. They were a unit. And she was an absolutely astonishing person. And every kid who had a birthday at Webb got invited down to the Webb house for angel food cake and ice cream with 4 or 5 friends. And she did that all the time. And of course, as a high school student, I had no idea what the level of commitment and attention to detail. There are 100 kids, and so that was 100, roughly 100 days that she was committed to doing that during the school year, and she did it with no sign of effort or anything. That was really interesting. they kept putting the drop of water in the bucket all the time. Keeping a school going and keeping kids taught and making sure that papers get graded and making sure the dining hall works and making sure all these myriad things that have to be done get done, and doing it gracefully and without sort of any apparent strain was just remarkable to see. And as I actually gained some experience in the world, knowing how hard it is to grade papers and what it's like to be a teacher and all this kind of thing, I realized just how hard and how difficult the what seemed to us as seamless classes and fantastic lectures and fantastic talks and all that, just how hard that was. It wasn't easy. It looked easy. It's like watching a great athlete do something fantastic and with great ease, but it's not easy. So I think that Thompson Webb's view of being a good person was very important. And of course, Vivian Webb she never explicitly said that, but she walked the walk, and we knew how they interacted, and they were an example of a really good, healthy, long-term marriage which had dealt with lots of troubles, financial problems, all sorts of ills, Depression era crashes, and that sort of thing. So we saw what a long-term enduring marriage was like, and I think that was, for me anyway, that was a very good example of good people living good lives. There were extraordinary faculty here when I was here in the late 50s. Ray Alf, of course, Murray Alexander, who taught physics, was a Scotsman who had been in the RAF and had a master's in physics from Caltech. Brilliant guy, absolutely wonderful teacher. Larry McMillan, who taught ancient history, and who was a Southerner, and was incredibly enthusiastic. And he would talk about, Agamemnon, and the gates of Troy, and wonderful stuff in the Egyptian thing. So Larry was great, and we made notebooks for our ancient history course. Fred Burr taught freshman English down in what no longer exists, the old Stone Shack. Ramsey Harris was a polyglot of the highest magnitude, and he knew all kinds of stuff. He was a really odd duck, and he certainly wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but he was a very interesting man, and he knew a lot about a lot of stuff. He taught. We in those days had Saturday Bible class. It was called Bible, but in Ramsey's case, it was comparative religion. And we learned about Buddhism, we learned about Hinduism, we learned about Islam, we learned about Confucianism. I mean, it was just, it was an astonishing thing. This was one day a week, Saturday morning Bible class. So, these people were just over the top, superb teachers. John Iverson was an English teacher, and greater dedication hath no teacher than to grade a 200-word paper written by hand in a notebook for every student in the class every week. and the English teachers here did that, and they corrected your English and did all that. So these people were astonishing. I guess the thing that was so exciting about these people was they were intellectually engaged, in all kinds of things. And I've left out Fred Hooper, who we nicknamed Durf, but he was a wonderful guy. He taught math. He was a little straight-laced, but very charming uh, really concerned about students. He used to take kids over to hamburgers at this new restaurant in Monrovia called McDonald's, the original McDonald's, and the hamburgers were all wrapped up in white paper and all that stuff, and they were better than they are now. And we would go to concerts with Fred and Grace Hooper, and he would make sure that kids got out and saw the world a little bit. You know, he knew what cabin fever of boarding school could be like, and he, kind of opened the shutters a little bit. So he was a splendid guy, and he was in charge of all the dances. I don't know if you ever heard the term the Hooperian Circle. In those days we had dances with girls' schools because we weren't co-ed. School wasn't co-ed. So we would invite Marlborough School or Westlake or one of the other girls' collegiate schools over, and you would have assigned dates. And the rules were that you could be in several places. You could be in the dining hall, which was all the tables were removed, the old dining hall, and you could be in the pergola, which was adjacent to the dining hall, or you could be walking around the Hooperian Circle, which was the road that went around the old dining hall, which is now it was just north of the what is the old schoolhouse, and I guess it's kind of where the library is now. But you could walk all the way around that circle, which we call the Hooperian Way after Fred Hooper. So yeah, these guys were great, and it was an astonishing collection of people. And of course, they were all hand-picked by Thompson Webb. I just remember the chapel talks. Fred Burr giving. He didn't like giving chapel talks, and he refused to give more than one chapel talk a year. And he would get up and be very pugnacious and very passionate, and we'd all kind of go, oh, "Mr. Burr!" And I remember the atmosphere of those chapel talks, and just the sort of ambiance of school life, which is really good, really interesting. I like classes. I remember being in English class, and we had a lot of very witty, funny people in our class, and peccary trips. Of course, that was a big deal. And I went on a summer peccary trip, where we went to the North Dakota Badlands of North Dakota, and I went on an Easter trip. And that was great, and there were some great incidents with Ray Alf, who was a little guy, incredibly physically fit in my time. He could do one-armed push-ups, not like this, the way you or I would do them, even if we could do one, but he did them like this, with either arm. And I can tell you a story about Ray on a peccary trip. There used to be out on the old Route 66 some yellow and red painted gas stations, the Whiting Brothers gas stations, and they would have next to them souvenir shops and all of these things, and there would be signs for miles about these souvenir shops, and they would say, "Stop at Whiting Brothers, two-headed lizard," or something on and on and on about all this stuff. And we'd be driving along, and Ray would be sitting in the Alfmobile driving like this with his eyes about this level on the steering wheel, and he'd have a cigarette in his mouth, and he'd be going along like this, and we'd be going past these signs, and we'd all be kind of dozing away as we would be driving out to the Mojave or something, and we'd drive past one of these signs, and Ray would thrust his fist into the air and shout, "Yes!" And of course we'd all look up, and what he had shouted yes to was a huge sign advertising one of these snake pits that said, "Was Darwin right?" We were in scenic South Dakota. Ray had a unique camping system. We all had cots, and we had ground cloths that didn't go on the ground, they went over the cot. You didn't have a tent. you just slept under your ground cloth and the rain poured down, which it did, of course, in the summer in the Badlands and so on. We had a big rainstorm. We all were sitting in the trailers and the Alphamobiles waiting for the rain to break, and it did in the evening with the sun low on the horizon, which is of course the time that you want for rainbows. So the sun was off in one particular area, low in the sky, and the rainbows came up, and it was a triple rainbow out there in the Badlands. And there's a picture of Ray with his fists thrust up to the air, looking like that. And I'm not sure if it was taken then. I think it was. I think maybe Bill Webb took that picture that summer, but it may have been another summer. But if it wasn't that summer, certainly the emotional feeling with the triple rainbow was the same as that exuberant picture of Ray with his fist up there. And of course it was the contact between nature as she is today and underneath the soil all around us, nature as she was millions of years ago in the Miocene. So when I was here, the biology classroom and the fossil collection and the museum, the nascent museum, were all in the basement of the Jackson Library. And it was all jammed together, and Dumbo and Prudence and all the Brontotherian skulls were out there, all jammed together, very close together. But it was sort of a wonderful place. It was like sort of the best attic you'd ever been in, with all kinds of cool stuff and preparation benches around behind the cases, and the table that we all did our dissections on for biology, and pipes running through the top that provided Ray, Alf, with a place that he could do chin-ups on. And it was a place of promise, where science became a world that opened up. And the famous time spiral was there. I think there's a new version of the time spiral now in the museum, but the original one that sort of made out of bed springs was there. And you walked into this place that was jam-packed with junk, and fossil collections, things that people had named after mostly their girlfriends, I think, and the Pat Muffler stuff, and all these photographs of and Malcolm McKenna, sort of the superstars who had been a few years ahead of time. And it was really sort of a magic place. And of course that has moved into the museum as it is now. And the excitement of being able to do your own original hunting for fossils and research was something unique to Webb, and it's something that's still I think unique to Webb. Well, I think that it's a place where you can grow, and it's a place of community, where people treat one another. At least it was when I was here, and from everything that I can see about students here now, that's still the case, where kids look out for one another, where it is a place of community and tries to foster community and all that. I think the way Webb encouraged community and sort of made it a focus of life was certainly a good thing then, and it's something I think people should know about a boarding school. The community, the depth of interactions that you get with your friends and your acquaintances at a school like Webb is different from what you would get at a different sort of place. I think the school is doing a very good job of doing of living the legacy and making the legacy work. I think the school has developed. It's not the school that it was when Thompson Webb was here. It couldn't be. But I think it's gone in a direction that, were he around to comment on it, he would approve of. learning how to learn is more important than what you learn. And I think Webb was really good on that. And I think it remains really good on that.